What is a qualifying APM participant? I'm JP Sharp with CMMI, and I will be leading you through this discussion. So we've identified what advanced APMs are, and we have those participants in advanced APMs. But then we need to identify the actual clinicians who will receive the rewards under the Quality Payment Program. And so those are the qualifying APM participants. So when we say Qualifying APM Participant, or QP, we're talking about the specific clinicians who are participating in advanced APMs. And there's a specific threshold that the MACRA law set forth to identify which clinicians are actually participating in advanced APMs, and that they, either individually or as a group, collectively have enough of their Part B payments or Part B patients through that advanced APM. And that's saying that they are sufficiently participating in an advanced APM to receive these rewards under the Quality Payment Program. On the right side of the slide, you'll see that beginning in 2021 of a payment year, so performance period 2019, that threshold for percent of payments or patients through an advanced APM may be reached through a combination of both Medicare and other non-Medicare payment arrangements. So we won't just focus on Part B, but we could also focus on payment arrangements with private payers and Medicaid. That will start in the third year of the program, so we won't go into great detail with that here, but there will be more information about those potential arrangements and ways to become a qualifying APM participant in the future. So we'll go through a series of steps here to go from how do we identify those participants to them actually being identified as qualifying APM participants, meeting those thresholds and receiving the rewards. So the first step is that we will make these qualifying APM participant determinations at a group level as a default. So everybody participating in an accountable care organization or a group practice or our gain shares with certain entities, those will all be collectively assessed as one unit. So they will become qualifying APM participants or not become qualifying APM participants altogether. We have one exception to that where for certain types of APMs, where there is not a participation list of a single cohesive group of participants working together, but rather they have affiliated practitioners who may collaborate in a variety of ways with that APM entity, but they're not necessarily part of the same unit working collectively together. So in those particular cases, we'll identify these QPs individually and do these calculations, one for each person as opposed to doing it as a group. So then the next step is to identify a percentage threshold score for that group. And then we'll do that using two different methods. And we'll do them in parallel, so we'll do two methods at the same time. And they're both based on Part B professional services. Just one is focused on the payments for those services, and the other is focused on the actual number of people served through Part B professional services. And both of these methods are also parallel in their concept, in that we consider what is through an advanced APM as based on their attribution. An attribution is who the APM entity and those clinicians are responsible for under the terms of the advanced APM. So for the cost and quality of care that you provide specific beneficiaries, that's what you're assessed on under this advanced APM. So that is what's going to go in the numerator of this percentage calculation. In the denominator is a concept called attribution eligible, and that's really the set of beneficiaries who could potentially have been attributed to you. They may have been attributed or they may not have been, but that's representative of your overall Part B population that you serve. That's narrowed just a little bit for those who could not have categorically been attributed to you. So then the second part of this second step is doing that actual calculation. And as I said earlier, we'll do both of these methods in parallel. So you'll end up with two threshold score percentages, one using the payment amount method and one using the patient count method. They're parallel, again, using attributed over attribution eligible, It's just the payment amount method uses dollars for the Part B professional services, so what you've been paid for those services. And the patient count is just counting up the number of beneficiaries who fit into those categories. And then once we have those percentage threshold scores, we compare them to this table. And this is a table of QP thresholds. And so you'll notice that there is one set of thresholds for that payment amount method and one set of thresholds for that patient count method. And they vary a little bit because those ratios tend to work out slightly differently in practice. And so we'll take that payment amount threshold percentage and compare it to these numbers here. And then we'll take that patient count threshold and compare them to that second row. And you'll notice that both of them increase incrementally over time. So starting in the third year and then again in the fifth year, they bump up a notch to be a little bit higher and more challenging to reach. So it requires greater commitment and greater, broader service through that advanced APM in order to meet these thresholds. And then finally, kind of wrapping back to what we said originally, if that group collectively meets those thresholds, so their threshold score is greater than the threshold in the table, then everybody in that group will become a qualifying APM participant. If they don't meet that threshold, then that group will not become a set of qualifying APM participants. Now we'll get into laying out how we actually look at these things over time, what periods of time we use to do these assessments, and then how we actually calculate the amount of that 5% lump sum payment reward. So first, on the left-hand side of this graphic, you'll see there's a QP performance period. And that's where we look at, are clinicians participating in an advanced APM? And if so, do they meet that threshold as a group? If so, we identify them as qualifying APM participants using that QP performance period data. Then we take those QPs, and in the subsequent year, which we call the incentive payment base period, that's where we determine how much they're going to get as a reward. So we look at all of their Part B professional services during that year, and we take 5% of the payments for that, and we make that payment to them in the payment year as a lump sum payment. And so that's the progression, is a QP performance period, the incentive payment base period is how much you get paid, and then we actually make that payment in the payment year. And so that will also overlap. So each year will be a new cycle. So starting in 2017 is our first QP performance period. But then 2018 will be the second QP performance period, but the first incentive payment base period for those who were in advanced APMs in the first QP performance period. So then the next part is identifying who specifically we consider to be participating in an advanced APM. And we do that through a series of snapshots. And that's really looking at our CMS maintained lists of participants on particular points in time during the QP performance period. And so these are the 3 dates here on the slide. So March 31st, what we'll do is we'll go into our systems and see who is considered participating in an advanced APM at this point in time, and are they associated with a particular APM entity. And so that's how we consider that APM entity group of clinicians to then assess them whether or not they meet those QP thresholds. Then we'll do that again on June 30th. And everybody who is on the list on March 31st will still be considered part of the group, but anybody who has additionally joined since then could also be considered part of the group. So it's additive. So then on August 31st, we'll do that one more time. So that's the end of the QP performance period, and we'll take one more snapshot, and everybody who is there who is not in the previous snapshots would be included in that group. So by August 31st, we have that total group of everybody who is in at any point, any one of those 3 points in time. So then this is a little more technical dive into how we do those QP determinations over time. And we'll actually do 3 different QP determinations during the QP performance period associated with each of those snapshot dates. So each participant, if you're in early, gets 3 bites at the apple for meeting those QP thresholds. So I'll walk through the first one, and then the second and third one are parallel in nature. So at the number 1 point, we'll look at point B is where that snapshot is. So that's March 31st. So that's where we look on the list and say, who is considered part of an APM entity at that point in time? That's the group we'll use. And then that period A are the set of services that we'll consider in calculating that numerator and denominator for both that patient count and payment amount methods. So we'll use claims from January 1 up through that snapshot date. Part C there is where we allow for claims to run out and do the actual analysis to determine who met those thresholds. And then our estimated point D is when we'll have final determinations. So if you, as a group, meet the QP thresholds and we identify you as such at point D, then you are a QP for purposes of that cycle. However, for number 2 is there for if you as a group did not meet those thresholds, or there are new people who have been added and captured in that second snapshot. So everybody who already met the threshold will retain that status, so that can't leave you, that will stick to you. But for everybody new who comes in, they don't automatically get that QP status, so we have to run that again as the whole group, just to see if they meet those thresholds. So you'll see there at point B, again, is that second snapshot date. We'll use claims up through that snapshot date. We'll have that run out, we'll do the analysis, and then at the end of October, we'll let that second group know if they met the thresholds. And then we'll do that one more time. So up through August 31st, we'll run that whole scenario one more time for anybody who did not meet it in those first 2 cycles. So the result is that by the end of the QP performance year, so by December 31st or January 1st of the subsequent year, everybody will know definitively if they met those QP thresholds and then are excluded from MIPS, so they won't have to do any MIPS reporting that starts in that next year. So then there's this additional concept of a partial QP. So we looked earlier at those QP thresholds. So that's if you as a group or in those certain cases individually meet those QP thresholds, then you're a qualifying APM participant. You receive that 5% lump sum bonus. You're excluded from MIPS. And in the long run, you'll get those higher fee schedule updates. However, there's a little zone beneath those QP thresholds where we'll still give you some reward, but not the full reward of the QPs. And so these partial QPs do not get the 5% lump sum bonus, but they get to choose whether or not they participate in MIPS. So they'll have an option of whether they want to report to MIPS and receive whatever adjustment that they would receive, or they can not report to MIPS and then they would receive neutral, so they would not receive any MIPS adjustment whatsoever. So these partial QPs, we actually don't think that they will come into play too much in the early years, but later when those QP thresholds become increasingly more difficult to attain, more people may end up in this partial QP territory. Thank you for viewing this presentation. For more information, please visit the Quality Payment Program portal at qpp.cms.gov.